Okay, so then good luck. Stage is all yours now.
Okay, thank you very much. So thanks everyone for joining in. As I was said, I work for the Swedish tax agency, and I delve a lot into the issues regarding cloud computing and where that sort of interconnects with privacy issues and especially the GDPR and what is happening. So I will try to look at that from some different angles and where I see that is heading. And this comes from quite a governmental or public sector view of things. So I'll first start some sort of things regarding the legal status of where we are. And my first point, and some people find this a bit offensive maybe, but if you delve into where we are, I would say it's not unclear whether an EU-based organization can use an American cloud service for personal information. So if you just use a service for non-personal information, they are maybe not that common, but of course there are some. That's a different use case. But if you have personal information, I don't see any uncertainty if we can use them or not. And that is why both the GDPR, but mainly it's the EU Charter that really came into play in the Schrems II decision, that it's not really the GDPR that is the issue at hand, it's the EU Charter that gives EU members or people living within the EU, inside the European Union, they give them some rights. And those rights are in conflict, sort of. We haven't been given rights because we live in the European Union, and they are in direct conflict with American surveillance legislation, and that is according to the Schrems II decision. So because of that, we still haven't got a solution or a way to do this or to find a way forward. If we are an EU-based organization, we want to use an American cloud service. So that's first to start off. And my point after that is it's only getting harder. And by that I mean we have a point in time now, or we had a sort of a point in time at the Schrems II decision, but after that we have a lot of decisions from different data protection agencies and from multiple courts. And all of those decisions and court decisions and judgments, they all makes it harder for us. If we thought that it was hard with the Schrems II decision, it's harder today. So we have to realize that that is the landscape, and that's where we are, and that's obviously right now where we're heading. And we have to go from that point and try to go forward. So some organizations, I again a bit offensive, maybe calling for wait for magic to happen. But again, some organizations tend to look for sort of someone else must solve this issue. And I see the appeal in that because a lot of the American cloud services are really, they're good services and you are already using them and you want to keep using them. And now you see that there are hinders to doing that. And if you are in that position, of course, you want something to happen, but you cannot solve it yourself. This is way beyond you as an organization, and it's also way beyond the American companies who sell the cloud services, because this is on a political level and on a legal level between the European Union and the USA. So the next step, we all know that there is a transatlantic data agreement in the works. We haven't seen it yet, so we have to wait and see what that brings. But we've already heard from several organizations and lawyers that if this one isn't clear cut and if it doesn't sort of hold water, then it will be challenged again, and we will end up probably with a Schrems III. So, and I have no idea, I have no insight on how sort of that looks like and where that will end up, but we'll have to see first what is the deal between the European Union and the United States. But anyway, apart from that, sort of it could happen, we could get a political deal that solves the issues regarding GDPR. But my point is that it's useless to wait for that. We have to adopt today. So instead of me as a customer adopting or trying to change what I do or what I use or similar. Or so I shouldn't do that. As a customer, I'm the responsible one for my personal information. I have to make sure that the different solutions that I buy from different vendors, they must be legally approved to use. And that is not the case today. So how do we go forward? And my view is that the best way to go forward is to talk to your vendors, talk to the markets in whatever sector that may be. It's an HR system or an email system or whatever that you need for your business or your organization. And talk to your vendors and say, hey, this is an issue. You need to solve it by changing. If they are not non-compliant, so they have to change the solution. They have to change the service they sell to you. So you can sleep soundly and know that my vendors are good. They take care of my personal information in a correct way. And that is where I want to be as an organization. So that's a sort of a way to go forward. And that is something that is happening a lot these days, I would say. So going from that, I will say some kind of landscape where we are. As I said, there are some legal hurdles in different countries within the European Union. Apart from the GDPR and the EU Charter, there may be other legal hurdles. It could be legislation regarding maybe health data or governmental secrecy, and there's always laws around that. And sometimes those kind of legislation is also an issue. So that also comes back to, again, with even if there's a new transatlantic agreement, maybe it doesn't solve the issues anyway, because there are other legislation that is still in conflict that is not solved by the new agreement. But that depends, but it could be. But then we have sort of the next discussion regarding this, and even if it's legal, so say again that we have a new transatlantic agreement, and from that point, from a GDPR standpoint, we say this is legal. We can use it from a GDPR perspective. But you have to ask yourself as an organization, and this is mainly targeted toward public organizations. So is the solution suitable? And by that I mean, is it good that you as a public organization use this cloud service? What could happen? What could be the effect be? So in a sense, that is sometimes you can do things, but does it look good? Or there could be other risks involved from a government standpoint. And I will delve a little bit into that. And to find out if something is suitable is of course not a binary decision, but it's a lot of, you have to think it through and you have to come to a conclusion if what it's sort of an acceptable solution to use. And some variants of this of way of thinking. One of them is aggregation of information. So say that your organization is using a specific cloud service and say, this is my data, I can put it in this cloud service and that is fine. And maybe that is true from every point of view. But if you think on a national level, so say that your public agency or your region or your municipality or whatever part of the public sector you're from. If you start to think, then if every organization, or say that 80 or 90% of the organizations within the public sector in the country is using the same cloud service, then you start to think on a national level. So what will be the effect when the cloud service is out of order or gone or broken or whatever? What will be the effect on a national level? So each organization can have taken a fully compliant and a reasonable decision on their own, but on a national level, the effect on a country, sort of in country as a whole, the effect could be disastrous. And that is of course hard, because if you're just a part of the public sector, say that you're a municipality, how should you know what does all the other municipalities do in your country? They could be, in some countries, I mean, there is thousands of municipalities or similar. So it could be very hard to realize what has everyone else done. And to look at it on a national level is hard work. But I think that's a way of thinking that we need to address. Then we have the war in Ukraine. That has changed a lot. And I think in every part of the European Union, we have to adopt. We see a lot of changes happening in different countries on an energy level or NATO or different things, and I will not delve into that. But Ukraine has shown us a lot of things. So again, where is your data? Could you have access to your data? The security around your data, and what happens if you're invaded as a country, because that is obviously a possibility. We thought a couple of years ago that is sort of that's Second World War or something. And we will never have war in Europe again, but here we are. So we have to realize that that is the case. And again, when we're using cloud services, and it's not just personal information, we have to think through as a country, where is our data? And also, when you put your data in a cloud service, you sort of say, oh, my data is there. My information is at this cloud service in this specific data center or whatever. But is it true? Is your data there and only there? Could others have access to your data? And if so, how? But that is an easier question. The harder question is, do you have access to it at all times? So is your information always accessible when you need it? So maybe it's better to have the wrong information. It could be manipulated. Maybe that is sometimes better than having no information at all, or maybe not. But again, when you are so dependent in a global world and you're dependent on an internet that is working and sort of not forced out of order, for some kind of reason, you have to think again, sort of what happens from a full sort of country perspective. What happens when you don't have access to your data? Some data, of course, it doesn't matter. Some data is critical. Sometimes it could be that you have a part of the puzzle. You have some pieces, but those are needed by some other parts of the country or by the public sector. So you have to think through sort of the whole puzzle to see that all pieces of the information that is needed for a country is available when you really need it. And this is, again, these are hard questions to address. And the last thing I want to point out in the landscape is a lot of times people sort of conflate the information security and privacy. Now, say information security, you could have a cloud service provider that says that, yeah, we have an ISO 27000. What's that? So you can be conformant with that, and you could have excellent information security, but that just says how your data is, where your data is, and how you treat it, how it's stored, how it's secure, and so forth. But the cloud service provider could still use the data that is stored to do different things, to try to monitor things, to try to find patterns. They could even sell it to other companies, and they still conform to the information security requirements, but the privacy for the individual is broken. So don't mess these things up. They're very, very different beasts. They have connection, but they're not the same. And if this was a bit depressing, maybe I'll try to look at some ways of going forward. And again, coming back to this, that I see the market has to move and has to adopt to the new climate that we have. And some ideas, these are my ideas that I see as possibilities of going forward. One is that the US hyperscalers, they could license their technology to European-based cloud vendors. We have seen this several times. Both Google and Microsoft have done that in different ways. but where they sell their software and ways of building their services, but they sell that as a license to a European company who sets up a cloud service that is fully EU-based. And by doing that, they cut the legal ties to the American government and to American surveillance legislations. And that's a way to go forward. And we have seen it the last couple of years, and also see that probably accelerating over time. We can also do this one where they create on-prem versions. We have seen that the hyperscalers usually, their whole business revolves around being a hyperscaler and having one cloud service that they can sell to multiple customers. And that's of course cost effective, and that creates value for the customer. But again, we have issues now. So we can see that some hyperscalers, and for example, ServiceNow is a good example, who used to be a pure hyperscaler and a pure cloud service company, and now they have taken their software and they repackage it and sell it as an on-prem version. And for some customers, that is better. They can still use that technology, but they can run it in their own data centers. And if that's maybe for some customer, that is a better solution. We also see that there's a lot of SaaS vendors who have built their offering usually, so some kind of cloud service, but they built it on top of an American hyperscaler, their IaaS or PaaS. And what we also see a movement in the market is that these SaaS vendors, they exchange the American hyperscaler for a European-based hyperscaler or cloud provider. And usually, if you just built your service around virtual machines or containers, it's usually not that complicated to do this move. And there are definitely European cloud service providers that is as good and sometimes better, sometimes not better, depending on sort of what you're going to do. But it's definitely an option. And I can see a lot of migrations going on, and I've seen it the last 2 years. So I think we will continue to see this movement because that's one way to solve the issue we have. Or again, as a customer, you can do everything on-prem. So maybe you will have to leave the US hyperscalers and buy other solutions that you can run on your own in your own data centers. That is, of course, common, and that's sort of where we will come from usually before the cloud services came along. But we could also do hybrid solutions. I haven't seen that much, but maybe that's a way of going forward where we split application and data. So the hyperscaler has the technology, the algorithms, the smart stuff, but they don't own the data, they don't store the data, they just process the data. It's not always a solution, but sometimes that may be a solution, that you store the data yourself and you send it temporarily to the cloud service provider for manipulating the data or process the data in some way, and then you get the results back. And again, you as a customer store the data. And sort of the last thing I wanted to share a little bit with you is again how to move the market and how to change things. It's a large Swedish project within the Swedish government, or it's even beyond the government. It's also municipalities involved, that we try to find solutions for digital collaboration. And this is typically a market that is owned by Microsoft with Teams, or Zoom, or Cisco with WebEx. It's typically applications. And some, of course, and a lot of other solutions out there. And you can see like Slack also being in this space. But these solutions come with the same issue. They are all American hyperscalers. They all need to process personal data. And as I said, we don't see that as a possibility. So what we've tried to do in the Swedish public sector now is we work together. So we have a collaboration between parts of the public sector, of joined forces and decided on a requirement specification and decided on where do we want to go. We want good collaboration solutions, but that adheres to the privacy regulations. We want them to adhere to the GDPR and the EU Charter. We want them to adhere to Swedish legislation regarding secrecy and sort of another legislation that we have to follow as public agencies. And that means the information classification is almost all kinds of data that we will have, and also in large scale. But going forward and say that we want these kinds of solutions, we want a modern workplace where we can do digital collaborations in between, inside your public organization, or between public organizations, or between a public organization and a citizen in the society. So to move forward in this space, we've realized each of us is too small. So that's why we're doing a joint collaboration where we try to say to the market, this is where we want to go. We want solutions that solves these issues for us. And the amazing thing is, we're just a couple of agencies in a small country like Sweden, and many said to us, but you will never change anything. You're too small. But that's not the case. The reality is we see a large change, a lot of change in between the vendors. They are creating new solutions. They are changing how they sell their software or their cloud services. So we see a massive shift in the digital collaboration space. For example, Zoom, who is creating a totally different way of selling the Zoom solution that is disconnected from the USA. We also see Rocket Chat and Mattermost and Nextcloud and Jitsi and Pexip and a lot of other solution providers that changes the way their software works to adopt to what we are demanding from the Swedish public sector. We see that as an amazing project, and that's why I feel quite confident that if we just say to the market, this is what we want, this is where we want to go, please sell us solutions that we can use. And things obviously change. And with that positive note, I'll end this presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions you have, and as long as we have time for.